The rain started early that evening, the kind that made the city feel smaller and quieter. Emily Carter noticed it as she packed her bag at the Community Learning Center in Portland. She had planned to leave on time, maybe stop for coffee, maybe go straight home. Nothing about the night felt important. Supposed to be ordinary. Emily liked ordinary. At 38, she had learned that calm days were safer than exciting ones. She worked as a writing coach, helping adults learn how to put their thoughts into words. Some came for career reasons, others for personal goals. She never asked too many questions. Listening was her strength, but protecting her own heart had become a habit. As she turned off the lights in the classroom, the door opened again. "Sorry," a man said quickly. "Am I too late?" Emily looked up. It wasn't from the earlier class. It's mid-40s, dark jacket, tired eyes that suggested long days and short sleep. He held a notebook close to his chest like it mattered, more than he wanted to admit. "The class ended," Emily said gently, "but I can answer questions." He nodded, relieved. "I'm Daniel. Daniel Wright. I just signed up this week." She smiled politely. "Emily." There was an awkward pause, the kind where people decide whether to speak or walk away. Daniel chose to speak. "I don't really need help with spelling or grammar," he said, almost apologetic. I need help saying things." Emily studied him for a moment. She had heard many versions of that sentence before. Usually it came with jokes or nervous laughs. Daniel didn't laugh. "What kind of things?" she asked. He looked at the floor, then back at her. "The kind you keep inside too long." That answer caught her off guard. Emily gestured toward a chair. "You can sit," she said. "We have a few minutes." Daniel sat, keeping his distance. The rain tapped harder against the windows, filling the silence so neither of them had to rush. "I've been married for 12 years, Daniel began. "I love my wife. I really do. But somewhere along the way, we stopped talking about anything real." Emily listened without interrupting. She had learned that silence made people braver. "I don't want to complain," Daniel continued. I feel like I'm disappearing. Like if I don't say something soon, there won't be anything left to say." Emily felt a familiar pull. This was why she did this work. Not for essays or resumes, but for moments like this when someone trusted her with something fragile. "Writing can help," she said. "It slows your thoughts down, makes them clearer." Daniel nodded. "That's why I'm here. I don't want advice. I want to learn how to tell the truth without breaking everything." The words stayed in the air longer than expected. Emily hesitated. She should have kept it professional. Signed him up for the next class, ended the conversation. That was the safe choice. "Instead," she said, "we can start with one thing. Write one honest sentence." Daniel opened his notebook, his hand shaking slightly. He stared at the blank page like it was judging him. After a long moment, he wrote something, then closed the notebook again. "I can't read it out loud," he said. "That's okay," Emily replied. "Not yet." They stood up as the clock ticked closer to closing time. Emily grabbed her coat, but something in Daniel's expression stopped her. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for not rushing me." She nodded. Everyone needs time. As they walked toward the door, Daniel added, "Could I book a one-on-one session just to work on this?" Emily paused. Private sessions were normal, but something about this felt heavier. "Yes," she said after a moment. "As long as we keep it focused on writing." "Of course," Daniel said quickly. "I don't want to cross any lines." Neither of them knew how fragile that promise already was. Over the next week, Emily found herself thinking about the conversation more than she expected. She told herself it was just curiosity, just concern. But deep down, she felt something else, a sense of recognition. She, too, knew what it meant to swallow words until they hurt. Their first session was scheduled for a Tuesday evening. It's public room, glass walls, safe space. Daniel arrived early. This time, he seemed calmer, more prepared. "I wrote more," he said, opening his notebook. Not about my wife, about myself. Emily nodded, encouraging him to continue. He read a short paragraph about feeling useful but unseen, present but unheard. The words were simple, but they carried weight. When he finished, Emily realized she had been holding her breath. "That's honest," she said. "It's a good place to start." Daniel smiled, and for a brief second the room felt warmer. As the session ended, Emily reminded herself again this was work, nothing more. But as she watched Daniel leave, rain-soaked and thoughtful, a quiet question formed in her mind. What happens when helping someone find their voice makes you hear your own heart again? And without realizing it, Emily stepped into a story that was already moving faster than either of them could stop. Emily had tried to keep her distance, but the second session with Daniel changed everything. She had told herself to stay professional, to guide him through writing and nothing else. But it quickly became clear that teaching him was not going to be simple. Daniel didn't just want to improve his sentences. He wanted to uncover himself, and Emily found herself drawn in, unable to look away. From the moment he sat down that Tuesday evening, he seemed more open. He had a notebook filled with paragraphs that read like pieces of a life half hidden. Emily watched him nervously bite his lip as he flipped the pages. "I didn't realize I had so much to say," he admitted quietly. His voice was low, almost apologetic, but it carried a weight that made Emily lean forward instinctively. Started with small exercises. Write one sentence about your day. Describe a feeling you can't share. At first, it was simple and professional, but Daniel's words carried an unexpected depth. One paragraph told of a quiet morning where he made coffee for his wife but realized she was already gone, leaving the room empty, untouched by conversation. Another described a moment at work when he felt invisible, speaking and being unheard. Emily corrected minor mistakes, suggested alternate phrasing, but mostly she just listened. Listening became a dangerous habit. With each session, Daniel's honesty grew. He didn't seek excuses, he didn't blame, just admitted that he felt trapped in a life that was safe but hollow. Emily could see it in his hands, in the way he hesitated before speaking. Every word was measured but full of longing. Evening, Daniel surprised her. He brought a story he had written outside of class's short narrative, about two people who slowly drift apart despite loving each other. He read it aloud, voice steady but quiet, and Emily felt her chest tighten. The story wasn't fiction. It mirrored his life, his marriage, his fears. When he finished, he looked at her expectantly, as if waiting for judgment. Emily only said, "This is brave, it's real." He smiled faintly, but there was a sadness behind it. "I've been holding this in for years. I didn't know how to say it without making things worse." "Okay," Emily nodded. "That's why writing helps. It gives the words space to exist without causing chaos." The truth of his situation made Emily's heart ache. She knew what it was like to feel trapped in a life that seemed safe but left you empty. She remembered a failed relationship from years ago, how she had swallowed her feelings to keep the peace. She had buried longing, only to discover it returned in quiet moments she couldn't control. Seeing Daniel struggle with the same emotions brought her back to that time. As the weeks passed, their sessions became a lifeline. Daniel would arrive, slightly early, notebook in hand, prepared to spill pieces of himself onto the page. Emily guided him gently, asking questions, encouraging him to explore his thoughts further. She started to notice subtle changes, not just in his writing, but in his demeanor. He seemed lighter afterward, more alive, as if sharing his internal world made it possible to breathe again. Emily, too, felt change. Listening to him, helping him express himself, stirred emotions she thought were long gone. She felt drawn to his vulnerability, his honesty, his quiet intensity. It was not romantic in the obvious sense. There were no flirtations, no bold advances, but something deeper was forming, something emotional and electric. A silent recognition that two hearts can feel connected without crossing physical boundaries. One evening, Daniel shared a paragraph that stopped Emily in her tracks. He wrote about longing not just for his wife, but for being truly seen, truly understood. His words painted a picture of a man who loved deeply but feared that his feelings would be lost, unnoticed, and that fear resonated with Emily more than she expected. She realized that she, too, longed to be fully seen, fully understood. Sessions continued, and the line between teacher and student blurred, though neither acknowledged it. Emily reminded herself constantly that he was married and that her role was to guide, not to participate in his life beyond writing. Yet she could feel the connection growing. It was quiet, emotional, subtle, and utterly consuming. She noticed how Daniel's presence lingered in her thoughts long after he left. One evening, after a particularly deep session, Emily found herself walking him to the door, both of them drenched in the soft drizzle outside. Daniel hesitated, notebook clutched tightly before speaking. "I didn't expect writing to feel like this," he said. His voice was low, almost vulnerable. "It's freeing, but also scary." Emily nodded, understanding completely. "It always is. When you face your truth, it's never easy." They stood in silence for a moment, the city quiet around them. Emily felt a pulse of emotion she tried to suppress. She reminded herself he was married, and nothing should cross the boundaries of their professional relationship. Yet she could feel how close they were to an unspoken emotional threshold, a line neither of them had intended to approach. When Daniel finally left, Emily returned to her empty apartment, heart racing, mind swirling. She told herself she needed to focus. To stay professional, she could not allow herself to become emotionally entangled. But the feeling lingered, persistent and undeniable. The connection they shared was not physical, not overtly romantic, but it had a depth that left her restless. For Daniel, the sessions were becoming therapy in disguise. He did not say it aloud, but Emily could see it the way his shoulders relaxed after expressing thoughts he had held inside for years, the way his eyes held a softness that had not been there before. And for Emily, each session was an emotional journey. She was guiding him, yes, but she was also discovering herself. Realizing how much she had craved connection and honesty, the tension grew, subtle but undeniable. Emily knew that the risk of emotional attachment was real. But she also understood that cutting off Daniel entirely could hurt him, could leave him isolated again. So she stayed, walking a delicate line, teaching him how to express the truth without losing herself. One evening, after Daniel had written about a memory with his wife that made him ache with longing, Emily spoke softly, almost to herself. "You're braver than you realize." Daniel looked up at her, and for the first time there was a vulnerability in his eyes that made Emily's heart tighten. "I didn't know I could say it," he admitted. Emily nodded, feeling the weight of their shared, unspoken feelings. She knew the sessions were transforming him, but they were also changing her. She was becoming part of his story, even if she would never admit it. The writing had opened a door she wasn't sure she wanted to close, and the consequences of opening it fully were unknown. As she closed the classroom door that night, Emily felt a quiet tension in the air. Something had shifted between the man, emotional intimacy that neither could ignore, even if they tried. She wondered how long they could continue these sessions, without crossing the delicate line of attachment, without letting their growing feelings turn into something neither was prepared to confront. And as she walked home, rain dripping from her coat, Emily realized that teaching Daniel to write had become much more than a lesson in words. It was a lesson in hearts, in longing, in honesty, and in the quiet danger of connection. One small sentence, one paragraph at a time, they were discovering themselves and each other in ways that would change everything, even if neither of them knew it yet.